The classroom was huge. 300 alien students sat in rows that went up like a theater. Jake Morrison looked around at all the strange faces and tried not to feel small. He was the only human in the Galactic Academy's most important war, studies class. Professor Zethkar stood at the front. He was tall and had skin that looked like blue crystal. His voice was deep when he spoke to the class. "I have news from the Galactic Council," the professor said. He pressed a button, and words appeared in the air above his head. "All humans are now banned from military training exercises. They are classified as Category 7 combat threats." The whole room exploded with noise. Students from different worlds started laughing. Some made clicking sounds, others hissed. Jake felt his face get hot as hundreds of eyes looked at him. A student named Veltar stood up. He looked like a big lizard with sharp teeth. "This is stupid," he said. "Humans can barely fight on their own planet. How can they be dangerous to us?" Another student named Zekth made clicking noises that came out as words through his translator. "Humans still use old weapons, metal bullets and chemical explosions, very primitive." Jake sank lower in his chair. Earth had joined the galaxy community only 3 years ago. Most aliens thought humans were good for simple jobs and nothing else. They saw humans as weak and dumb. Professor Zethkar held up his hand for quiet. "The Council says this decision comes from several incidents with human military contractors, but the details are secret." A student made of light and gas floated near the ceiling. Her name was Kethara. "Maybe our human friend can tell us," she said in a voice like music. "What terrible weapon do humans have that scares the Council so much?" Everyone got quiet. All the aliens stared at Jake. He felt nervous and cleared his throat. He thought about his grandfather, who had been a soldier. His grandfather told stories about human wars and how humans never gave up, even when things looked hopeless. "I don't know," Jake said quietly. "But I know humans. When we're in trouble, we do crazy things that shouldn't work but somehow do." This made the aliens laugh even more. Some students from the insect world clicked their approval. The lizard people made hissing sounds that meant they found something funny. Professor Zethkar moved on to other topics, but Jake couldn't pay attention. He kept thinking about the ban. Why would the Council be afraid of humans? Earth's military was nothing compared to the alien fleets he had studied. The Saros Empire had conquered 12 star systems. Their ships could destroy planets. The Klaxi swarms moved through space like deadly clouds. The Vorthen crystal ships were almost impossible to damage. What could humans possibly do against forces like that? After class, Jake walked through the academy halls. The building was enormous, with corridors wide enough for the biggest alien species. Through the windows, he could see the city of New Geneva stretching out below. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went from the spaceport. He stopped at a viewing area and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were working alongside alien fleets, or at least they had been until 3 days ago. Now they were banned from military operations. An alien student walked up beside him. It was Crixnall, a being that looked like a walking tree with 4 arms. Crixnall was one of the few aliens who treated Jake like an equal. "You look troubled, human friend," Crixnall said. His voice sounded like wind through leaves. "I just don't understand," Jake said. "What could humans have done to earn a ban like this? We're not warriors like the Saros or the Klaxi." Crixnall's 4 arms moved in what Jake had learned was thoughtful gesture. "Perhaps that is exactly why you are dangerous," he said. "Warriors fight like warriors. But what happens when someone fights like something else entirely?" Before Jake could ask what that meant, Crixnall walked away. Jake was left alone with his questions and a growing feeling that there was much more to this story. That evening, Jake went to his small apartment in the student housing complex. It was designed for humans, which meant it felt normal after spending all day around aliens. He made dinner and tried to do his homework, but he couldn't focus. He opened his computer and searched for information about the human ban. Most of the results were just news reports saying the same thing the professor had announced. But buried deep in the search results, he found a mention of something called Operation Broken Arrow and another called the Kepler Incident. Both references were marked as classified. Jake tried to access them, but got error messages. Whatever had happened in those operations, someone wanted it kept secret. Jake leaned back in his chair and thought. The Academy had the best military archive in the galaxy. If answers existed, they would be there. But student access was limited, especially for classified materials. He thought about Professor Martinez, his advisor from Earth's exchange program. Martinez had been helpful since Jake arrived at the Academy. Maybe he would know something about the ban or how to access more information. Jake sent a message to Professor Martinez asking for a meeting. Then he went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept going back to the laughter in the classroom and the way the aliens had looked at him. They saw humans as harmless, but the council clearly thought otherwise. The next morning, Jake got a reply from Professor Martinez. The message was short. Meet me in Archive Section 7 at 1400 hours. Your security clearance has been upgraded. Jake stared at the message. His security clearance had been upgraded? When and why? He checked his student records and found that his access level had changed from 6 to 9 just yesterday. That was high enough to see most classified materials. Something was happening, and Jake was starting to think his advisor knew more about the human ban than he was letting on. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. At exactly 1400 hours, Jake arrived at Archive Section 7. The area was restricted with armed guards and security scanners. He showed his identification and was surprised when the guards waved him through without questions. Professor Martinez was waiting inside. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept well in days. "Jake," he said, "we need to talk. There are things about humanity's role in galactic politics that you need to understand." "Is this about the ban?" Jake asked. Martinez nodded. "The ban is just the beginning. What you're about to learn will change how you see our species and our place in this galaxy. The question is, are you ready for that kind of truth?" Jake thought about the laughter in the classroom and the fear he had seen in Professor Zethkar's eyes when he mentioned the classified incidents. He thought about Crixnall's words about fighting like something other than a warrior. "Yes," Jake said. "I need to know what humans did to scare the entire galaxy." Professor Martinez led him deeper, into the archives, toward files that would reveal the terrifying creativity of human military thinking. Professor Martinez walked Jake through security doors that needed special codes to open. The archive building was quiet except for the hum of computers and air systems. They passed rows of data storage units that contained the military history of hundreds of worlds. "The files we're going to see are classified at the highest levels," Martinez said as they walked. "Most people in the galaxy don't know these incidents happened. Those who do know wish they could forget." They reached a small room with a large viewing screen and comfortable chairs. Martinez sat down at a control panel and began typing commands. Jake took a seat, feeling nervous about what he was about to learn. "Before we start," Martinez said, "I need you to understand something about humans. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, predators, natural disasters. We survived by being stubborn and creative and willing to try anything." The screen lit up with the seal of the Galactic Defense Corps. Classified warnings flashed in several alien languages. "Other species developed in safer environments," Martinez continued. "They learn to fight according to rules and traditions. They have honor codes and military doctrines that go back thousands of years. We learned to survive by breaking every rule if we had to." Jake watched as the screen showed a star map of the Kepler sector. Red markers showed enemy positions. Blue markers showed friendly forces. It looked like a standard military situation. "This is Operation Broken Arrow," Martinez said. 6 months after Earth joined the Galactic Federation, raiders attacked civilian ships in this sector. The Federation sent a task force to deal with them. The display showed detailed information about the enemy forces. They were called the Hegemony Alliance, and they had taken control of an asteroid field. Their ships were well armed, and they had turned the asteroids into fortresses. The Federation task force included 2 Soros battle cruisers, a Klaxi strike wing, and a Vorthan command ship, Martinez explained. Textbook deployment, overwhelming firepower and superior technology. Jake studied the formation. It looks like they should have won easily. They should have, Martinez agreed. But the asteroids provided perfect cover for the raiders. The IAB Federation fleet fought for 18 hours and couldn't break through. Casualties were mounting on both sides. The tactical display showed the battle in progress. Weapons fire lit up space between the Federation ships and the fortified asteroids. It was the kind of organized combat that Jake had studied in his strategy classes. At hour 19, Federation Command made a decision that changed everything. Martinez said, "They called in human military contractors. A new ship appeared on the display. It was tiny compared to the massive Federation vessels, barely 1/10 their size. The name Pittsburgh's Revenge appeared next to it. One small ship? Jake asked. What could it accomplish against an entire fortified position? Martinez smiled grimly. Watch and learn. The human ship approached the battle zone, but instead of joining the organized attack formations, it veered off on what seemed like a random path through the asteroid field. A voice came through the speakers. It was speaking English with a heavy accent from one of Earth's older industrial cities. Federation Command, this is Captain Dan Rodriguez of Pittsburgh's Revenge. We're going to try something new. Recommend all your ships pull back to minimum safe distance. What's minimum safe? Distance, came the reply from the Federation command ship. There was a pause before Rodriguez answered. We're not really sure. Maybe 40,000 kilometers? Jake felt his stomach drop. 40,000 kilometers? What kind of weapon needs that much safety space? Martinez paused the recording. That's what everyone was asking. The Federation. Commanders had never heard of any weapon system that required such extreme safety margins. The display showed Federation ships pulling back as requested. Meanwhile, the tiny Earth vessel continued deeper into the asteroid field, heading straight for the heaviest concentration of enemy forces. What you're about to see, Martinez said quietly, is why humans are now classified as Category 7, combat threats. He resumed the recording. The Pittsburgh's Revenge was now broadcasting on multiple radio frequencies, but it wasn't military communications. It sounded like commercial radio stations from Earth. The crew spent the previous 18 hours listening to all hegemony communications, Martinez explained. They analyzed speech patterns, cultural references, and psychological profiles. They learned everything they could about the enemy. On the screen, the human ship had reached the center of the asteroid field. It was completely surrounded by hostile forces that could have destroyed it in seconds. Hegemony forces, came Rodriguez's voice again, but now he was speaking in perfect hegemony dialect. This is Captain Steve Johnson of the trade vessel Profitable Endeavor. We're carrying medical supplies for your wounded and premium Terran alcohol for your victory celebration. Jake watched in amazement as the hegemony ships immediately stopped shooting and began requesting docking procedures. They thought the human ship was one of their own supply vessels. They're pretending to be allies? Jake asked. It gets worse, Martinez said. The human ship began docking with the largest hegemony vessel. From the outside, it looked like a normal cargo transfer. But the sensor readings on the display showed something else entirely. Federation Command, came Rodriguez's voice, back to speaking English. This is going to be very loud. What happened next made Jake's blood run cold. The human ship didn't contain medical supplies or alcohol. The cargo bay was filled with every nuclear warhead the crew could fit inside, and they armed them all simultaneously while docked inside the enemy flagship. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. It vaporized 17 asteroids, destroyed the entire hegemony fleet, and created a temporary star that burned for several minutes. Jake sat in stunned silence as the display showed the aftermath. Where the enemy fleet had been, there was now only expanding plasma and debris. "The crew of Pittsburgh's Revenge?" he asked quietly. "Captain Rodriguez and his 7 crew members were killed instantly," Martinez said. "They knew it was a suicide mission from the beginning. They volunteered anyway." Jake tried to process what he had seen. They used nuclear weapons as a boarding action. They pretended to be friendlies, got inside the enemy defenses, and detonated everything they had. "Total mission time, 43 minutes, Martinez confirmed. "They eliminated an enemy force that had held off the Federation's best commanders for nearly a day." Jake understood why the Federation officers had been shocked. This wasn't military tactics as any civilized species understood them. This was pure human desperation applied to warfare. "No other species commits suicide attacks as an opening move," Martinez said. "It violates every principle of military doctrine. It's considered barbaric and wasteful." "But it worked," Jake said. "Perfectly. That's what scared everyone." Martinez brought up another file. Unfortunately, this wasn't an isolated incident. The screen showed a new location, Titan Station, a massive research facility orbiting a gas giant. Hostile markers surrounded the station, which was marked as containing 30,000 civilian hostages. 6 months later, Martinez said, a different group of raiders called the Crimson Fleet seized this research station. They were holding the scientists and support staff hostage while making demands. Jake could see from the tactical display that the station was heavily fortified. The raiders had turned it into an impregnable fortress. Standard siege protocol was initiated, Martinez continued. "Surround the station, cut off supplies, and negotiate for hostage release. It's the civilized way to handle such situations." How long did it take? 4 weeks. Negotiations had completely broken down when Federation Command decided to call in human contractors again. A new human ship appeared on the display. Newark's finest, crewed by former asteroid miners who had volunteered for military service. Jake braced himself for another display of human military creativity. He was beginning to understand that when humans got involved, the rules of warfare stopped applying. This time, Martinez said, the humans decided that the problem wasn't the raiders. The problem was the station itself. The recording showed the human ship approaching the massive facility and docking at what appeared to be a maintenance port. For 6 hours, they appeared to be doing routine supply deliveries while Federation forces conducted visible fleet maneuvers on the opposite side of the system. What were they really doing? Jake asked. Martinez smiled. They were turning the entire space station into an escape pod. Jake was about to learn that human military contractors had redefined the concept of hostage rescue in ways that would give military planners nightmares for generations. The recording continued with the human ship Newark's finest docked at Titan Station. For 6 hours, the crew appeared to be doing normal maintenance work while the Federation fleet conducted training exercises far away from the station. "What you're about to see," Professor Martinez said, "changed how every military in the galaxy thinks about siege warfare." At exactly 6 hours and 32 minutes, Captain Lisa Murphy's voice came through the communications system. Her tone was calm and professional, like she was reporting completion of a routine job. Federation Command, Newark's finest. Mission accomplished. All hostages are now in secured areas. You might want to move your ships back a bit. On the tactical display, something impossible began to happen. Titan Station, a massive structure that had been built over decades, suddenly began to separate into distinct sections. Jake watched in amazement as the station broke apart like a flower opening its petals. Each section moved away from the others, in a controlled manner, revealing that they were all equipped with independent life support systems and emergency propulsion. They turned the entire station into escape pods. Jake said in disbelief. 7 escape pods, to be exact. Martinez confirmed. Each section contained rescued hostages and everything needed to keep them alive. The raiders found themselves floating in empty space with no fortress, no hostages, and no bargaining position. The engineering data showed that the human crew had somehow reconfigured the station's entire structure during those 6 hours. They had used mining charges, maintenance tools, and improvised cutting equipment to weaken key structural points throughout the facility. "This is impossible," Jake said, studying the technical readouts. "You can't just redesign a space station's architecture in 6 hours. You can if you ignore safety protocols, building codes, and basic engineering principles," Martinez replied. "The humans didn't try to safely modify the station. They just made it structurally unsound enough that it would fall apart when they wanted it to." Jake realized that once again, humans had solved a military problem by completely ignoring how such problems were supposed to be solved. Instead of fighting the raiders or negotiating with them, they had simply removed the raiders' advantage by making their fortress disappear. "Casualties?" he asked. "0. No Federation losses, no civilian casualties, complete mission success. 7 very confused raiders were arrested while floating in space waiting for rescue." Martinez brought up a third file. The location was Proxima Centauri, where a heavily armed planet had declared independence from the Federation and was threatening to destroy any ship that approached. "This incident happened 8 months after Titan Station," Martinez said. Fortress world with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The planet's surface was covered with weapons, orbital defense platforms, and early warning systems. The tactical display showed a world that was essentially one giant military base. Jake could see that any traditional assault would be suicide. The planet's defenses were too strong and too well positioned. The rebels were demanding complete independence and threatening to fire on any Federation vessel that entered the system, Martinez continued. Diplomatic solutions had failed. A new human ship appeared on the display. Detroit's Answer, commanded by Captain Pete Williams. Unlike the previous incidents, this ship didn't approach the planet directly. Instead, it began visiting other locations throughout the system. "What were they doing?" Jake asked. "Shopping," Martinez said with a grim smile. The recording showed Detroit's Answer traveling to asteroid mining operations, gas harvesting platforms, and orbital construction facilities. At each location, they appeared to be purchasing or borrowing large amounts of industrial equipment. For 2 weeks, Captain Williams and his crew collected mining equipment, construction machinery, and propulsion systems from throughout the Proxima system, Martinez explained. Nobody thought to ask why they needed so much hardware. After 2 weeks, the tactical display showed significant changes in the system's asteroid belt. Several large asteroids now had artificial modifications, rocket engines, guidance computers, and massive industrial boring equipment. They didn't attack the planet, Jake realized. They threatened to drop asteroids on it. 17 asteroids, Martinez confirmed. Each one equipped with enough propulsion and guidance systems to guarantee impact with the planet's surface. Captain Williams calculated the orbital mechanics to deliver them over a 48-hour period. The final transmission from Detroit's Answer was brief and to the point. "Federation Command, Detroit's Answer. We've redirected 17 asteroids to impact the planet's surface over the next 2 days. Suggest the rebels reconsider their position. The planet's government surrendered within 6 hours. They gave up without a fight?" Jake asked. "Wouldn't you?" Martinez replied. Their orbital defenses were designed to stop ships and energy weapons. They were completely useless against kinetic bombardment from modified asteroids. The rebels realized that their impregnable fortress was actually a trap, if someone was willing, to drop rocks on it from space. Jake studied the engineering data. The human crew had essentially created a custom asteroid bombardment system using off-the-shelf industrial equipment. It was brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The asteroids were aimed at unpopulated areas, Martinez added. maximum psychological impact with minimal actual destruction. The humans proved they could devastate the entire world if they wanted to, which was enough to end the rebellion. Jake was beginning to see the pattern. In each incident, humans had looked at a military problem and solved it in ways that no other species would consider. They ignored established tactics, safety regulations, and conventional wisdom. 3 incidents, he said. 3 completely different approaches, 3 perfect victories, and each one more psychologically devastating than the last, Martinez agreed. The galaxy's military leaders realized that humans don't fight wars according to any recognizable doctrine. We treat warfare like an engineering problem that needs to be solved by any means necessary. Martinez began accessing a 4th file, but his expression became much more serious. What I'm about to show you is classified under Nightmare Protocol. It's why the human ban isn't just about military exercises. It's about preventing humans from demonstrating that we can treat the laws of physics themselves as tactical options. The new file showed the Vega system, which appeared almost empty except for the central star and a massive alien fleet positioned at the system's edge. The fleet was enormous, dwarfing anything Jake had seen before. The Synthesis Collective, Martinez said quietly. The most advanced hostile force the galaxy has ever encountered. 17 Federation battle groups were destroyed trying to fight them. Their technology was superior to ours in every way. Jake studied the tactical display with growing dread. If the previous 3 incidents had been enough to ban humans from military operations, what had happened at Vega, that was even worse. Traditional warfare was useless, Martinez continued. The collective's ships were faster, more heavily armed, and better defended than anything in the Federation arsenal. Every engagement was a complete defeat for our forces. A single human ship appeared on the edge of the display, Boston's Pride, commanded by Captain Tony Chen. It was approaching the system alone, apparently on a reconnaissance mission. The ship was specifically ordered not to engage, Martinez said. Their job was just to observe and report back with intelligence about collective capabilities. Jake watched as the tiny human vessel approached the massive alien fleet. The enemy ships ignored the small craft, apparently considering it too insignificant to bother with. Then Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system, and Jake realized that he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of what humans were capable of when they stopped thinking like civilized beings. Federation Command, Boston's Pride. I've got good news and bad news. Captain Tony Chen's voice came through the communication system clearly, despite being transmitted from the edge of the Vega system where his small ship faced the largest hostile fleet in galactic history. Federation Command, Boston's Pride. I've got good news and bad news. Go ahead, Boston's Pride, came the reply from Federation headquarters. Jake watched the tactical display as Chen's ship continued its approach toward the Synthesis Collective fleet. The alien vessels still showed no reaction to the tiny human craft. Good news is, I know how to beat them, Chen said, his voice carrying the calm tone of someone who had made a decision. Bad news is, you're really not going to like how I plan to do it. Professor Martinez paused the recording. What Captain Chen proposed next is why humans are banned from all military operations in the galaxy. Not just exercises, but any situation where human creativity might be applied to warfare. Jake felt his stomach tighten. The previous 3 incidents had been shocking enough, but Martinez's tone suggested that this one was in a completely different category. What did he want to do? Jake asked. Martinez resumed the recording. Chen's ship was now performing detailed sensor sweeps of the collective vessels while maintaining a safe distance. Federation Command, Chen's voice continued. We're going to do something that's never been attempted before. We're going to weaponize the star itself. The silence that followed was broken only by urgent communications between Federation command ships as they tried to understand what they had just heard. Explain, Boston's Pride, came the shaken response from Federation Command. The collective, Ships are positioned in perfect formation around Vega, Chen explained with the matter-of-fact tone of someone describing a routine procedure. They're using the star's gravity well for tactical positioning, but that also means they're completely dependent on that positioning. If we destabilize Vega, their entire fleet becomes trapped in a collapsing gravity well. Jake stared at the display in horror. He wanted to collapse a star. That would destroy everything in the system. Not collapse, Martinez corrected. Destabilize. Chen had calculated the exact amount of stellar manipulation needed to create a controlled solar event that would disable the enemy fleet without destroying the star. The recording continued with increasingly desperate communications from Federation Command trying to talk Chen out of his plan. Captain Chen, that would constitute a war crime of unprecedented scale. You're talking about using stellar engineering as a weapon. Chen's response would later be quoted in military ethics classes across the galaxy. Federation Command, they started this war by wiping out entire civilizations. I'm going to end it by making sure they can never threaten anyone again. Sometimes the only way to save millions of lives is to make certain the threat is permanently eliminated. Jake watched in fascination and terror as Boston's Pride began, deploying massive industrial equipment directly into Vega's corona. The engineering involved was beyond anything he had studied, but the principle was simple. If you couldn't outfight an enemy, you changed the fundamental rules of engagement. How is this even possible? Jake asked. You can't just modify a star. You can if you understand stellar mechanics and have enough industrial equipment, Martinez replied. Chen's crew had backgrounds in stellar engineering and asteroid mining. They knew how to work in extreme environments. The tactical display showed the human ship using specialized equipment to create controlled disruptions in the star's magnetic field. They were essentially building a massive solar flare generator using the star's own energy. The calculations required were incredible, Martinez continued. They had to account for the star's rotation, magnetic field variations, and the exact positioning of the enemy fleet. One mistake would have destroyed everything in the system, including themselves. Jake watched the stellar activity monitors show increasing instability in Vega's corona. Whatever the humans were doing was causing the star to build up energy for a massive release. Federation Command, Boston's Pride, came Chen's final transmission. Solar event will commence in 30 minutes. All Federation vessels should withdraw to minimum safe distance of 1 light hour. The electromagnetic pulse will disable every electronic system within the inner system. The recording showed Federation ships desperately retreating from the system, while the Synthesis Collective fleet remained in position, apparently unaware of what was about to happen. Then, Vega erupted. The star released a directed plasma burst that engulfed the entire collective armada. The energy release was visible from neighboring systems and created electromagnetic effects that lasted for months. When the plasma subsided, the alien fleet was still there, but completely powerless. Every ship was drifting in space like dead metal, their advanced technology reduced to inert matter by the stellar electromagnetic pulse. No lives were lost, Martinez said quietly. The collective crews were captured alive, and their ships were studied to advance Federation technology. But the psychological impact was immediate and absolute. Jake struggled to process what he had witnessed. They turned a star into a weapon, an actual star. And they did it with industrial equipment and knowledge that any human engineering team could possess, Martinez added. That's what terrified the Council. This wasn't some secret human superweapon. It was just human problem-solving applied to cosmic forces. Jake realized the true scope of what he had learned. Each incident had shown humans treating warfare not as a noble art or scientific discipline, but as an engineering challenge that could be solved by ignoring any rule that got in the way. The Galactic Council's decision was unanimous, Martinez continued. Humans are banned from military operations not because we might lose, but because we might win. And our methods of winning represent a fundamental threat to civilized warfare. Jake thought about everything he had seen. nuclear suicide bombing disguised as supply runs, space stations converted into escape pods, asteroid bombardment systems, built from mining equipment, stars weaponized using stellar engineering. We scare them, he said finally. Terrify them, Martinez corrected. Every species in the galaxy has spent centuries developing warfare into a predictable science with rules, protocols, and accepted limitations. Humans treat it like a creative problem-solving exercise. Martinez brought up one final document, the official council report that had led to the human ban. The report states that humans demonstrate a consistent pattern of tactical innovation that operates outside all established military doctrine, he read. Human forces show a willingness to ignore safety protocols, ethical constraints, and physical limitations when seeking victory conditions. Jake read over the report's conclusion. Human military capabilities represent a Category 7 threat, not due to superior technology or training, but due to an unpredictable creative approach to conflict, resolution that makes standard defensive preparations ineffective. So we're banned because we don't fight fair, Jake said. We're banned because we don't fight like anyone else, Martinez replied. And in a galaxy where military doctrine is based on predictable behavior patterns, that makes us the most dangerous force anyone has ever encountered. Jake sat back in his chair, finally understanding why his classmates had laughed at the human ban announcement. They couldn't imagine how a primitive species could be dangerous to advanced civilizations. They didn't understand that humans had learned to survive on a world that tried to kill them every day. They didn't know that human military thinking was shaped by the knowledge that sometimes the only choice was between death and doing something insane that might work. The ban will remain in effect indefinitely, Martinez said, closing the files. The Council has decided that some weapons are too dangerous to use, even in training exercises. Jake understood now why he was the only human in advanced military strategy classes. The galaxy's military academies could teach alien students how to fight wars, but they couldn't risk teaching humans new ways to break the rules of warfare. Outside the archive windows, ships from hundreds of worlds continued their peaceful activities, unaware that they were protected by the knowledge that humans were too creative to be allowed to play war games with the rest of the galaxy. The ban wasn't about keeping humans from winning military exercises. It was about preventing them from inventing new ways to treat the laws of physics as tactical suggestions. Jake left the archives with his head spinning from everything he had learned. The corridors of the academy seemed different now. Every alien student he passed represented a species that followed military rules and traditions. Humans were the only ones who treated warfare like a creative challenge. He walked back to his dormitory building, but instead of going to his room, he went to the common area where students from different worlds gathered to study and socialize. Tonight, he needed to think about what Professor Martinez had shown him. The common area was busy with evening study groups. Jake recognized several classmates from his war studies course. They were working on tactical problems, analyzing famous battles, and discussing proper military doctrine. Crixnall, the tree-like being who had spoken to him earlier, waved Jake over to a table where several students were debating strategy. "Human friend," Crixnall said, "we were just discussing the siege warfare principles. Perhaps you could share the human perspective on fortress assault tactics." Jake looked around the table at the expectant faces. There was Veltar, the lizard-like, Sauros, Zekth, the insectoid Klaxi, and Kethara, the energy being. These were the same students who had laughed at the human military ban just days ago. "I'm not sure you want to hear the human perspective," Jake said carefully. "Of course we do," Veltar insisted. "Academic discussion requires multiple viewpoints, even from primitive species." Jake felt a flash of anger at the word primitive. But then he remembered what he had learned about human tactics. Maybe it was time his classmates understood what they were really laughing at. "Okay," Jake said, sitting down. "You're attacking a fortress. The enemy has superior defensive positions. More firepower and better technology. Standard doctrine says you surround them, cut off supplies, and wait for surrender. What if that doesn't work? You increase pressure through targeted strikes, Zekth clicked. Demonstrate superior force to encourage capitulation. You negotiate with honor, Veltar added. Offer terms that allow the enemy to surrender with dignity. You wait, Cathara said. Sieges are won through patience and resource management. Jake nodded. Those are all civilized approaches. They follow established military principles and minimize casualties on both sides. Exactly, Veltar said proudly. Proper military conduct. Humans would probably just make the fortress disappear, Jake said quietly. The table went silent. The alien students looked at each other in confusion. What do you mean, make it disappear? Crixnell asked. Jake thought about Titan Station breaking apart into escape pods. If the problem is the fortress, then eliminate the fortress. Turn it into something else. Make it structurally unsound so it falls apart. Or just drop rocks on it from space until the defenders decide their position isn't defensible anymore. Thias students looked shocked. Veltar's scales actually changed color, which Jake had learned indicated strong emotional reaction in Sauros physiology. That's barbaric, Zekth clicked rapidly. You're describing the destruction of military architecture, not proper siege warfare. It's also effective, Jake pointed out. If your enemy is counting on having a fortress, and suddenly they don't have a fortress, they can't use fortress. Tactics anymore. Cathara's energy form pulsed with what Jake recognized as distress. Such approaches ignore centuries of military tradition. There are proper procedures for siege warfare. Human military history doesn't really include proper procedures, Jake said. We learned to fight on a world where the environment was trying to kill us. Sometimes proper procedures got you dead. He looked around the table at his classmates' disturbed expressions. They were beginning to understand that human military thinking operated from completely different assumptions. But surely humans recognize the importance of military honor, Veltar protested. Combat between civilized species requires certain standards of conduct. Jake thought about Captain Rodriguez detonating nuclear weapons while pretending to be a supply ship. Human military honor is about completing the mission and protecting your people. Everything else is negotiable. The discussion continued for another hour, with Jake explaining human tactical philosophy while his classmates grew increasingly uncomfortable. They couldn't understand how a species could completely ignore established military doctrine. No wonder you're banned from exercises, Zekth finally clicked. Human tactics are impossible to prepare for because they don't follow any logical pattern. They follow human logic, Jake corrected, which is apparently different from everyone else's logic. As the study group broke up, Crixnall walked with Jake toward the dormitory elevators. You have given me much to think about, human. Friend, the tree being said, I begin to understand why the Council fears your species. It is not your weapons or your strength that makes you dangerous. What is it then? Jake asked. Your willingness to change the rules of any game you cannot win by conventional methods, Crixnall replied. Most species, when faced with an impossible situation, will choose honorable defeat over dishonorable victory. Humans seem to prefer impossible victory over any kind of defeat. Jake thought about that as he rode the elevator to his floor. Crixnall was right. Humans had a cultural tendency to refuse to accept that some problems couldn't be solved. When conventional solutions failed, humans invented unconventional ones. In his room, Jake opened his communication system and sent a message to his family back on Earth. He told them about his studies, the academy, and his alien classmates, but he didn't mention the classified files or what he had learned about human military operations. Instead, he found himself writing about the differences between human thinking and alien thinking. How other species seemed to accept limitations that humans would try to overcome. How aliens followed rules that humans might ignore if those rules didn't serve their purposes. As he wrote, Jake realized that the human ban wasn't really about military exercises. It was about protecting the galaxy's established order from human creativity. Every species in the Federation had found their place in a complex system of military doctrine, diplomatic protocol, and cultural exchange. Humans were the wild card. That could disrupt that system simply by approaching problems differently. The next morning, Jake returned to his War Studies class. Professor Zethkar was lecturing about defensive formations when he noticed Jake's presence. "Ah, our human student has returned," the professor said. "Perhaps you have thoughts on the Vorthon defensive matrix we're studying." Jake looked at the holographic display showing the crystal ships arranged in a complex geometric pattern. It was beautiful and elegant, with each ship supporting the others in an interconnected web of defensive fields. "It's very sophisticated," Jake said diplomatically. "Indeed. The formation has been perfected over centuries of tactical development. It represents the pinnacle of defensive coordination among multiple vessels." Jake studied the formation more carefully, thinking about what Captain Chen might have done when faced with such a defense. What happens if you attack the star they're orbiting instead of the ships? The classroom went silent. Professor Zethkar's crystalline features reflected the holographic light as he processed the question. "Attack the star?" he repeated slowly. "The formation depends on orbital mechanics for positioning," Jake explained. "If you destabilize the star, the entire defensive matrix becomes unstable too. The ships would have to choose between maintaining formation and avoiding stellar radiation." Several students started talking at once, their voices expressing shock and disbelief. The concept of attacking a star as a tactical option had never occurred to them. Professor Zethkar held up a hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried a new note of respect and wariness. "That is a very human observation," he said finally, "and exactly why your species is classified as Category 7 combat threats." Jake realized that he had just demonstrated the problem with having humans in military strategy classes. They couldn't help but think of solutions that violated every assumption about civilized warfare. The ban would continue because humans were too dangerous to think alongside. Not dangerous because of their weapons or their strength, but dangerous because they could look at any military situation and imagine ways to change the fundamental conditions of engagement. As the class continued, Jake sat quietly and listened to discussions of proper tactical doctrine. Around him, aliens debated the finer points of established military theory, while he found himself thinking of ways to make all their careful plans irrelevant. He finally understood what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of civilized species. They were the barbarians at the gate, not because they were violent or primitive, but because they were creative in ways that made everyone else nervous. The human military ban would remain in effect, not to protect humans from losing, but to protect everyone else from learning just how many rules of warfare were really just suggestions that could be ignored by anyone willing to try something insane. And, somewhere in space, crews aboard ships with names like Memphis Rising and Phoenix's Return continued their regular duties, carrying with them the knowledge that humans were the species other species were afraid to play war games with. It was a reputation that would follow humanity for generations, the species too creative to be trusted with military exercises, too unpredictable to fight alongside, and too dangerous to ignore. The galaxy had learned to keep humans on T,